Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On this week's episode, we're going to be covering the Baked Ziti Open, which was a lovely tournament put on by Goldsaber artist we featured here on the channel. Recently featured Kickstarter here. So yeah, we have some really cool stuff to talk about here with Tim's campaign. Thank you for all for being patient as I took a week off. I had PAX Unplugged last weekend, and I filmed some content the day before PAX Unplugged. I filmed some content the day after PAX Unplugged, and after 5 days straight of having guests in the home and also and doing a bunch of stuff in a row, really needed the week to not make something. So appreciate y'all patience. Let's get into this top 16 breakdown today. Before we do, make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button, as it helps out videos like this. Let's talk about the Baked Ziti Open. Some cool decks here today. We're going to start with a pretty sweet Kinnan list by Woody. It's called I Can Count to 7 by 2s. Can you? We have Kinnan, Bond or Prodigy, here with this cEDH list. This is a pretty standard Kinnan from what I can tell here. We've got the new High Fae Trickster coming in from the Foundations set, and I think it's going to be a pretty common new piece of tech there with Kinnan. It's a pretty solid piece that allows you to be able to flash in win conditions. I've always said that Valley Flood Caller, since printing, has been one of the biggest upgrades for the deck in a long time, and then giving a flash enablers that does not require to use non-creatures only. Big ups for Kinnan, and Kinnan being a deck that really, comparatively to others, does not mind as much to pay for that upfront cost. Pretty sweet stuff there. We got a Thorn Mammoth in this version. Been in and out of a lot of Kinnan lists I've been seeing lately, but Thorn Mammoth here to lock up a spot. Let's go check the lands, usually indicative of what type of Kinnan this is. This is a 28 land Kinnan list, and I've noticed more Kinnan lists on Freed from the Real, especially with Enduring Vitality being a pretty central part of the game plan. The Freed from the Real lines in Kinnan are actually a lot more viable than they really ever have been historically, so it's pretty cool to see Freed from the Real just as an additional combo piece here with most Kinnan decks. Apart from that, this Kinnan list has some pretty standard inclusions. Dramatic Reversal, definitely one of the spicier ones. I do not see an Isochron Scepter here, so this is a value Dramatic Reversal here in this Kinnan list. I guess for some explosive turns, maybe hoping to get maybe an extra activation or ramp into some of their more dangerous pieces a little bit earlier in the game. But apart from that, pretty sweet to see this Kinnan list here start off our top 16. Congrats to Woody. We are seeing the return of Atraxa here to these top 16s. We have a pretty standard, I would argue, Atraxa list here where, we have our single food chain outlet there with the Mist Hall Griffin. We have our Displacer Kitten plus Teferi combo in this deck, the ability to bounce a rock over and over again, reset it with Kitten, etc., etc. We've got our classic Thoracle Consult lines here. This is a pretty classic food chain mid-range deck, giving TNT a run for its money as the de facto sans red deck of the format, but Atraxa here putting up a top cut and a top result. I love seeing a solid land base under an Atraxa deck. I remember in the previous format, people were trying to run 28 lands with a 7-drop in the command zone. That definitely was something that gave me a little bit of hesitation. So it's nice to see a little bit more consistency on that aspect. Interesting split of artifacts here. Mox Opal with an 11 artifact list. Not including the artifacts that are in the creature base, but still pretty snug there for the Atraxa artifact package. And yeah, we're sort of taking Atraxa nowadays. Looks like a lot of just little smatterings of different aspects of what you want to have in your mid-range soup. And that's sort of leading you to the Atraxa conclusion at the very end there. Definitely more clones in Atraxa, I've noticed, than in other lists, mostly because you can then start leveraging 2-mana copies of your commander, which adds up pretty quick. We've got Ron Swansong here with the Baked Ziti Sweetie. Sisay Weatherlight captain here in this top 16. Sisay is starting to become more of a consistent player once again in these top tables and starting to show. We've got our classic Aminatu, Nicol Bolas, and Oath of Teferi line here with this deck, the most consistent way to win the game. The Leyline of the Guild Pact in this version, which was a piece that a lot of folks were interested in testing when Ravnica, I should say Murderers at Karlov Manor, the Ravnica themed set that is not on Ravnica in name, was printed, but A number of us, myself included, kind of decided that it really wasn't worth the inclusion, but I'm curious to hear from the pilot of this deck list whether it ended up showing up and doing some work here for this list. It is cool that Leyline does turn any of your legends into immediate 5-color payoffs, right? So things like Agatha Soul Cauldron, Chromatic Ori, all of those do become immediate 5-color legendaries, right? Which does have a significant amount of synergy, not to mention the fact that it does fix your mana for this deck as well. We got a lot of higher end sort of packages here with this Sisay list. We've got things like Sigarda to give all your permanents hexproof, which, trust me, as a Sisay player, they do kill your creatures, so definitely solid to see it here. We have Talion for your card draw, the classic Urtai package. We've got the new packages with Iorith and I guess Iorith and Sakashima, but no Marvin. I feel like Marvin the Murderous Mimic has been a really popular option with a lot of these Iorith variants of this deck, but no Marvin here for this specific rendition by our pilot here. So that part's pretty interesting. And then we've got the pretty classic interaction suite here. Nothing too crazy about as far as like super unique choices. A braid's kind of interesting, and then crop rotation, for a deck that does win with Gaia's Cradle, makes a little bit of sense, but traditionally not always included in this list. Also, 28 lands with a crop rotation package is definitely a slim artifact package, and we do see right here Marvin's one of the first cards on the sideboard, meaning probably very close to the chopping block for this deck. We have Cowl 101 here with the Shape of Water, Thrasios and Tevesh, one of our new top dogs in the format here for this top 16. We've got some interesting stuff here. I'm starting to see more TNTs throw a Delny in the list. They said, hey, Malcolm Tymna has been playing this card pretty effectively. Why not us as well? And you know what? Giving all of your dorky little creatures evasion so they can get through, get you some Tymna draws, it could be a lot worse. I mean, the only thing you really have to worry about when you're going for that game plan is a Bowmasters, which, definitely a real threat, but it is one that you can definitely play around too. So we've got the Valley Floodcaller in here, and we do have Banishing Knack, so there are Floodcaller lines. For those who don't know, you are trying to pick up mana rocks over and over again, generate infinite mana for your Thrasios. Same thing can be done with Basalt, Monolith, and Kinnan, able to make infinite mana that way. We also have some Devoted Druid tech in here. We have Devoted Druid and Hazel Brewmasters. If your Druid's in your graveyard, you can make a food copy of Devoted Druid, and then you're able to make infinite green mana that way. And then what other Devoted Druid enablers do we have? We don't have a Machine God's Effigy, but we do have Swift Reconfiguration, able to, for a single white mana, turn Devoted Druid into a vehicle and then generate infinite green, which is pretty good to threaten at instant speed. Infinite mana is a good thing to be able to threaten in a lot of different circumstances. So really sweet to see this TNT mid-range list here. It definitely seems like there are some packages that are starting to get solidified in a lot of the top TNT performing lists. So this list is definitely using some of these consistent packages and able to make a top 16 with it. Probably our coolest list for today, if I can be so bold, is Disa the Relentless. We've got a Tarmogoyf deck here in this top 16, or a Lurgoyf, I guess I should be more specific. It says whenever a Lurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you can then put it onto the battlefield. And then whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you make a Tarmogoyf token. So yeah, able to whip out the classic Jund Goyf strategy, but this time in cEDH. Yeah, Disa was a card that I know people had mentioned for cEDH, but I wasn't sure if it would break the barrier. I know one of the Bufftown Bullies tournaments had a Disa list make top cut, and I'm not sure if Jay Hensey was our pilot for that tournament, but got some cool stuff here. We got another Goyf, just Goyfing it up right from the very beginning. We've got a couple changelings in the deck. We've got OG Tarmogoyf. We got Barrow Goyf in here. Got Polygoyf. We got so many Goyfs. Terravore, Lurgoyf, yeah, Pyrogoyf, Necrogoyf. We got Goyfs as far as the eye can see in this deck. And yeah, honestly, there seems to be some sort of buried alive package with Dread Return here in the deck. I don't see like there is a Hermit Druid. Okay, so there's some sort of Hermit Druid combo with your commander out. As soon as all of those Goyfs hit the graveyard, they do come back to the battlefield. And I'm assuming there's some sort of combo here in this deck. I mean, at the very least, all of them come back and you have Anger in the graveyard for instant Goyf beats, although I think that's a very finite amount of damage in this deck, so I'm curious to see if that's the primary win condition here. I gotta say, there's a lot of stuff going on with this deck. Oh, Insidious Roots is also very interesting. We've got a Breath of Fury here, which is traditionally associated with like infinite combats, which makes sense because if all of your goyfs are connecting, they're making Tarmogoyf tokens, which means those are things that you can put Breath of Fury onto as long as those things have haste. So that's sort of a way to make that happen pretty quickly. Greater good here, yeah, if you get your goyfs buffing up their power, easy to crunch them, draw a bunch of cards, throw them in the graveyard, get them back with your commander, etc., etc. Garrick's Uprising, drawing for your goyfs, Torture's Existence, just able to recur things out of the graveyard. You got a Concordant Crossroads, more ways to give all of your creatures haste. This list is super spicy, and if there's the pilot of this deck out there watching this video, I would love to hear some of the many nuances that I assume I am missing with how intricate this deck is. There's a lot of really cool stuff here going on with this cEDH Goyf deck. Yeah, I mean we've got Goyfs as far as the eye can see. You're milling your library, you're playing Goyfs. They're pretty big because they have power. A lot of them equal to your card types, or some of them equal to creatures in all graveyards, like Necrogoyf is. So there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in this crazy little Goyf deck. So really cool stuff. Congrats to our pilot for taking this insanely off the wall deck and making it to the top 16 of this tournament. We want to thank one of our sponsors for today, ToaMagic.com, also known as Tales of Adventure Magic, for being an awesome online store and providing tons of great deals for you out in the audience. If you use code Comedian at checkout, you can pick up your online singles at ToaMagic.com, who have an amazing selection of singles available. And also, if you're heading to any major events, whether it be cEDH or otherwise, there's a chance Toa Magic is having a booth at those events. So check out ToaMagic.com, and you can even do pickup in person at the major events. We got Teleria East here with his classic Oath of Sisay list. We're going to compare that to our Sisay list from earlier in today's episode. So as we can see, there are 15 differences between our initial list. Some of the cards I actually called out as interesting in our previous variant, which was like Crop Rotation, Leyline, Sakashima, the Sigarda. So definitely a number of these pieces, the Talion as well. Oh, I didn't even see the Catilda when I was first analyzing that list, and the Abrade. So some interesting pieces here. And then we see Teleria East, not on Force of Will. Gilded Drake's actually one that I historically never really liked in Sisay, but now that the format's slowing down, you can sort of just like steal someone's 2-color legend and then just accelerate your Sisay plan, which I think is kind of cute and funny. And no Deathright Shaman in Teleria East list, where instead he has Worldly Tutor, One Ring, Legolas's Reflexes, the Marvin that we spoke of, a Mox Opal, which I think he is famous and infamous for at this point with this Sisay list of really just trying to jam this Mox Opal as much as possible. We have Basim, which I do think is picking up popularity among Sisay pilots. We got our most lovely Colossal Sky Turtle, which is a card that I am super happy to never leave home without. And I actually thought I heard Teleria East say that they were a little bit lower on the card in a recent piece of content he was on. So I'm glad to see he's back on the Sky Turtle train. And then more mana. I think that's like sort of the key with Sisay right now, is that is a mana hungry deck. And yeah, generating much mana, putting it all into Sisay activations, the way to go with this deck, and showing up, doing consistent top 16s here with this list. So nice job. We've got a Hotchkiss with Foul Play. Good puns, good puns. To start, we got a Francisco Thrasios list here in this top 16. Francisco kind of got more viable with the printing of our favorite friend here, Valley Floodcaller, because it is a bird, and therefore it makes the Banishing Knack and or Retraction Helix combos a little bit easier with Francisco, and kind of gives you an extra reason, apart from Francisco's combos on their own, to be running these combos that we mentioned earlier. We also have traditionally the Agatha Soul Cauldron combos with Francisco. For those who don't know, if you give Walking Ballista's ability to Francisco, and as long as there is not a land on top of your library, which is the worst part of this combo, is that sometimes you can hit a land and whiff pretty hard. But if there is no land, you're able to remove a counter from the Francisco to ping your opponents because it has Ballista's ability. It will then explore, and as long as there is a non-land on top of your library, you will put a counter on Francisco, therefore generating a basically little pirate machine gun shooting down your opponents. We have Thrasios here with your classic Thoracle combos in the deck. We have Kinnan here Is this featuring a Basalt Monolith? Who's to say? It is. Yes, it is. It is. We don't seem to see any of the Devoted Druid stuff unless I'm crazy, though, which is kind of interesting because it feels like the Devoted Druid Hazel's combo is kind of like one of the main reasons to be in the Sultai colors right now. So I'm actually quite surprised to not see that combo in this list, supported by Survival of the Fittest, which has been a really, really popular, really powerful combo. I love seeing combat research in here. It's one of the few cards that like turns Francisco into a quasi useless engine, into something where you can start generating, not only you drawing from the research itself, but you're also able to explore, get a little bit of advantage before you're drawing. I think it's actually one of the few cards that turns Francisco into a real engine, which is great because otherwise it's a little bit of dead weight outside of the Flood Collar combo. And nice to see some Necropotent support here. I think it's like if you're gonna play a non-Tymna Thras version, you lean into the Francisco combos like we mentioned, but also you can go a little bit zoomier if you have one less color. You can sort of use the slim down color options to make sure the deck's a little more lean. So nice job with your foul play here. We have I Blame Max here with When in Doubt, Jund Out the Soggy Edition. This is Max's return to his Thrasios Vial Smasher list that he was doing really, really well with last season. So really cool to see him back on the ball with this deck. It's been a deck that's been really consistent for him for making at least top 16s with it. So pretty cool stuff here. Sort of a really interesting list that for some reason is probably not the list he actually played. Yeah, this is definitely, I'm gonna say this is probably one of the more recent errors we've been seeing from the top deck software, where it yeah, this is last updated 7 months ago. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say this is not the list he played. Um, whoops. Max has been playing Tivit in the past couple tournaments I've played with him, so I'm assuming he's probably on that. But all that being said, I will try and message him and see if I can get his real deck list that he played and maybe post that in the link in the description or in a comment down below. And if Max, if you're watching this, I bet your deck was super cool, dude. And I'd love to see what you actually played. Hell yeah. We've got Sir Hip Hop Hippo, which honestly, pretty proud I did that the first time. With Godo Hard or Go Home. Really not Godo Hard or Go Home? Godo Home? I feel like, is that, I don't know. Okay, go to hard or go home. Yeah, this is Godo. Here in this top 16, we are seeing Godo still clinging on to life. We said Godo was in a good-ish spot post-ban as people were still getting their feet underneath them and trying to figure out how to reformat again, right? And Godo says, hey, while everybody's stumbling, I'm going to be able to pick some wins up off the ground. Whereas right now, things are a little bit more established, and Godo's still out here making a top cut. We've got some pretty sweet stuff here with this Godo list. We got some like unique stuff that's pretty cool as like a lot of the post ban tech, but nothing that's insanely like, oh my god, this is super crazy Godo tech here. We got a lot of really cool stuff. Like for classically speaking, we have the Humble the Host combo, which does go infinite with your commander Godo, and the main point of this deck is really just to count to 11. Apart from that, we've got some stacks pieces like Trinisphere, Vexing Bauble. We got our Blood Moons, stuff like that, and a lot of artifact synergy, like a lot of artifact synergy, all of which basically says, hey, I'm going to count to 11 faster. Flaring Pain here, really cool anti the One Ring tech, very cool stuff to be able to play around what is one of the more commonly placed advantage engines in the format, and a bit of a pain in the butt for Godo players. We got things like wheels, we got Molten Duplication here for making a little bit of extra Godo copies, but I don't know. Yeah, there is a dual caster line as a backup line, which I do think does help the Godo plan a little bit to have some sort of pivot options available to you. Party Thrasher is one that I haven't seen traditionally in Godo, which I do think is kind of interesting. Gives you a little extra kick, a little extra card advantage. And I do like to see that the Voltaic Servant, basically being the third Voltaic key or Manifold key in this deck, able to push a lot of value there. And also, we got to shout out Treasure Napper, which I'm pretty sure is starting to become pretty standard for Godo, but really cool card I've always wanted to play in cEDH, and I just like can never find the spot for it. But I think it's super sick. Like everyone's tapping their Mana Vaults and their Soul Rings and all that junk, and suddenly you're like, all right, like I don't mind if I gain control of that for a little bit. We have Two Dios here with Tivit cEDH. This is a Tivit list and one of a few Tivit lists here in our top 16. This may be the return of Tivit. As I mentioned a couple times here on the podcast, I have been noticing. I called this a podcast. This is a YouTube show, but I've been noticing that Tivit's been in a really decent spot as of right now. And Cal and I on the Mind Sculptors podcast have mentioned that we are sort of unified in that understanding. And here we have Tivit up here at the higher ranks of this top 16. Vexing Ball was some new Tivit tech I haven't really seen in the past. The other one I think that's worth mentioning is the Aven Interrupter, which is pretty sweet. Able to be a creature counterspell, a little bit harder to interact with, a sort of anti-breach, anti-exile tech, good against your Obnixiluses, Obnixli, good against breach, as I mentioned. Definitely some interesting graveyard hate you get here from the Aven Interrupter. Lavinia, a little bit scary for a longer game deck, but interesting to see that here in the list. We got Urza Lord High Artificer, great with Displacer Kitten, also great with getting Clue flooded with Tivit, so that's nice that that's not going to happen. And then I like a healthy amount of board wipes in this Tivit list. Winds of Abandon, an asymmetrical board wipe on top of Dam and Toxic Deluge. This Tivit deck saying, no, 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 the board state will not matter during the course of this match. So pretty sweet stuff here. A lot of interaction, classic Tivit sort of option here with a very controlling Tivit list here. And Tivit able to make the top cut. Have you ever worried that your play is too light? Well, look no further. We have heavy play. And if you use code comedian at checkout, you can get 10% off your order. Heavy play is changing the name, keeping your cards safe and sound, keeping your dice safe and sound, and keeping it all together in these sleeve. I mean, look at this stuff. This stuff's awesome. I love using heavy play products. They've got 6 sleeves. They've got super awesome heavy play deck boxes and dice trays and playmats that I use all the time. They are continuing to try and upgrade their product and do super cool new innovative stuff. There's some really, really interesting stuff going on with their playmats. They're trying to get art designs on the new playmats. There's a limited run on the initial bunch. I'm not sure if they're still out, but if you check out heavyplay.com/comedian, you can find out if that limited run is back up on the store, and you can use my code to get a little bit off your order. Helps everybody out. All right, thank you so much for Heavy Play for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for watching. We've got a super sweet Stella Lee list here by Man of Steel 1190. Pulling out my 6 shooter. This is one of the most unique Stella lists I've seen in a really long time. I feel like Stella was built a little uniformly. And I think this list is actually pretty sweet. And I think it could be one of those things where it gives Stella a little bit more gas than it's had lately. This list kind of says, hey, I don't mind sort of steering into the gimmick of Stella. I like this idea a considerable amount, and I think it works really well here, right? So, first of all, I think Marvin's a really big pickup for Stella, right? Basically a hasty Stella. Anytime you want to get Stella back out, meaning that, like, yeah, they can kill Stella, but then they have to kill Martin if they want to remove the summoning sickness. It's a whole, I said Martin, it's Marvin. It's a really interesting dynamic here. We have Kitsa, which I've been trying to figure out exactly what Kitsa does in this deck, apart from combo with Dramatic Reversal, which there is in this deck. But the reason why this Stella list is interesting is because it's playing things like Ral, and it's playing things like Stormkill Artist, which also, and Ashling, which resolve off of copies of spells, as well as they have triggers that resolve off of the cast as well. So, for example, if, traditionally Stella Lee wants to have the things that say like untap and draw a card, like Cerulean Wisps, or the Refocus, which is right here, which is like untap draw. So that way, when you make infinite copies of a thing, you're drawing through your deck, right? But as you can see from this list, there's things like Dramatic Reversal, Title Board, Twitch, or Twiddle, that's a different one, Shore Up, right? A bunch of different ways to just untap Stella with some or other like marginal benefit, right? And with all of those things, now when you have something like Ral on the battlefield, it is just infinite copies of spells, which are still able to ping your opponents to death, right? So the amount of redundancy in this deck is extremely, extremely high. You got things like Hidden Strength doing all the same stuff. And what's really interesting about it too is on your combo turn, they effectively act as counter spells because you're able to make a copy of whatever spell would be potentially lethal, right? And then your opponents are like, cool, in response, like, I'll go to counter it, I'll go to kill Stella, whatever it might be. And then every single untap spell allows you to go, cool, untap Stella, try again, untap Stella, try again. And you're able to basically threaten multiple wins on top of each other even if you're going through the more traditional means. So I think this is a really sweet interpretation of Stella, and I'm curious to see if this variant has a little bit more legs in the current format. A lot of instant speed stuff, which I do think is the key to success with this commander, and it's doing some really cool stuff. Also has Underworld Breach as the Stella agnostic line, as well as a way to finish the game post drawing through your deck with Stella. So a lot of really cool stuff here from this list from Man of Steel, and I really think it's a very interesting take on Stella, and I'm so curious to see if this becomes kind of the new way Stella's built. It's some really interesting stuff here for sure. We have Muldrotha Loves Pumpkins here with I Don't Want to Play Blue Farm, Attempt 2. This is Wernog and Cecily. Specifically, not Blue Farm, but in the same colors. We have our Stranger Things legally distinct commanders here. And we have a very legally distinct from Blue Farm list here in this top 16. For those who don't know, the Wernog piles tend to be just a little bit faster than traditional Blue Farm, with the understanding that you're giving up the card advantage in the command zone that Blue Farm gives you, which does lead to a certain level of consistency. So basically, a little bit of consistency out the window for a little bit of zip in your step here from this Wernog Cecily combo. Our pilot here making the claim, I do not want to play Blue Farm and instead want to play these colors in a non-Blue Farm way. So we have a lot of that here. A lot of the cards you will associate with either Rogsire or Blue Farm, the faster sort of 4-color decks in the format. Chance for Glory, another sort of Final Fortune effect, a really cool inclusion here in this list. And I think if you're going for these more proactive lines, for example, with things like Necrodominance, Necropotence, etc., makes a lot of sense to have these in the deck. Definitely a bit of a lower land count than a deck like Blue Farm traditionally has. So this deck's definitely got a little bit of gas behind the engine and just trying to zoom a little bit while also having, still having access to Ranger Captain, Grand Abolisher, Silence, all of the classic white effects that Blue Farm gets to get away with. Before we break into our top 4, we're going to remind you we do coaching here on Comedian MTG. So if you want to take your CEDH game up to the next level, this is how you can do it. You can find me at comedianmtg@gmail.com or in my new link tree, which has a bunch of different links to a bunch of different places where you can find me. Find me on Twitter or Instagram, any of those places. Send me a DM, and I'm happy to set up a session with you. Once again, I really want to appreciate all the folks who were super patient while I had a very crazy couple of weeks here, especially with PAX and all the filming that we did before and after PAX. It's been a wild couple of weeks, but a wildly successful couple of weeks as well. So thank you all for your patience. And yeah, if you want to take that CEDH game to the next level, hit me up there. We're also going to be doing a Christmas promotion this for the next unspecified amount of time. Basically, if you get a coaching session for another person, you can get it at a discounted rate. And yes, if you would like to exploit the system and you and a friend would like to get coaching sessions for each other, effectively just buying a cheap session, that is okay. Feel free to DM me about details for that. We have XLX Mystic Raider here with Thrashing Zot, a deck he's becoming to get known of with this Thrasios Tevesh Zot combination. It tends to be a pretty mid-rangey list here, focusing on things like Biomessage Familiar. It seems like since last time I watched him pilot this deck, the Cloud of Fairies stuff has taken its way out of the deck. We have Sowing Mycospawn here, your classic Gaia's Cradle Fetcher. We have Displacer Kitten here for what I'm assuming would be some sort of Eternal Witness line. For example, you can do Eternal Witness and then like Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual over and over again, or through a number of different spells and things like that. There's definitely some interesting stuff you can do with Displacer Kitten Eternal Witness, but Displacer Kitten also just happens to be very, very powerful with Tevesh Thought, as every single non-creature allows you to activate the Planeswalker abilities over and over again. Basically, for every 3 spells, you're able to draw 4 cards, which is a pretty good rate of exchange, I'd argue. We've got some classic mid-range pieces here. Thoracle combo in the command zone, or Thoracle combo in the deck, not the command zone. We have Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy here, and do we have a Basalt Monolith? We do, here for infinite mana in that way. Another list that is choosing to not go for devoted druid combos here in this deck, which once again, kind of surprised to see that not in Sultai list, but multiple Sultai lists in this tournament today saying, no, thank you, we do not need devoted druid. So it's pretty interesting to see. Spellseeker also does some pretty nasty stuff with Displacer Kitten. Apart from that, it's also just a really good way to convert your green tutors to actual ways to win the game. And it seems like this is a very classic Sultai list in the fact that like very few actual infinite mana combos and a lot of just reliance on Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation type stuff. There's also Snap, Eternal Witness, and Gaia's Cradle here as one of the other main combos for this deck. So Pretty classic Sultai option here. A lot of interaction, all that kind of stuff, and cool to see Thras Tevesh still able to make these top tables. This was a duplicated list because it was 404 on the page here. As you see, it says unknown commander. But this is Devrik's Sphinxter list. This is another Tivit list here in this top 4. And let's compare it to our more recent Tivit option. So comparing to our 7th place Tivit list, that version has 31 cards different. Whoa, that's crazy. So we got a bunch of lands that are different in our other version by 2DOs, things like Vexing Bauble, no Dranith in our top 4 version, no Grafdigger's Cage in our top 4 version, no Mana Drain, no Karn, Trouble in Paris, Windfall, the Mind Sensor that we called out, Word of Invention, no Curse Totem, no Intuition. Wow, a lot of stuff missing. Not even an offer you can't refuse in our top 4 version of Tivit. But what we have instead, different counterspell and dispel. We have Mnemonic Betrayal as a win condition. They have Necropotent. So this is a more proactive version of Tivit for sure. We got Rev the Tithe Taker, pretty interesting inclusion. Actually, really surprises the other Tivit wasn't on Lotho. Lotho's been sort of a Tivit staple, given the fact that it's a giant 6 mana commander for quite some time. Got some Flood Caller lines in here, so definitely a much more proactive version of Tivit. Able to surprise your opponents with a little bit of explosivity out of this Tivit list. I really like some of the conclusions here, and definitely seeing some interesting choices about exclusions here from the other version as well. Things like no Gemstone Caverns in the list that we saw earlier, no Oppo, all that kind of stuff. But really cool flash lines here with this Tivit list. Also, Tezzeret, great way to get a time sieve onto the battlefield, and sometimes a great way to get some of your value artifacts on the battlefield as well. So pretty big shifts here from this Tivit list, and I really do like the secret Necro spice. I feel like if you're an opponent sitting against a Tivit, you don't expect them to just jam a Necro and then go for a rip 30 at instant speed line, but sometimes gets the job done for sure. So congrats to Deverick for the top 4. And don't worry, we have Khalil here with Tivit, the Master of Ceremonies. We are talking about another Tivit here in this top 4. That is half of the top 4 being Tivit. Big comeback for Tivit. So in comparison to these lists, we have another 20-something card difference here. So Gemstone Caverns also not in Khalil's list here in this top cut. All the Necro synergies that we saw for this version are not in Khalil's list as well. No Tezzeret. So it seems like Khalil's list is actually a little bit closer to the other version that we saw in 7th place during this tournament. We have things instead like, some heavy control pieces, things like Final Showdown, Thraben Charm, Vanishing Burst. Now, Khalil is actually known for playing a lot of these very controlling pieces and for having a slower, grindier Tivit list. And the inclusions I'm seeing are definitely showing that. Like, for example, knowing that like Agatha's Soul Cauldron is in here. Just to be a hate piece, most likely. Like it is more of a hate piece than it is actually a piece that will provide a lot of value. Sometimes you snipe a ranger captain and it's super sick when that happens, but realistically it is just anti-breach tech, things like craft diggers, containment priest. We have Stormscape Familiar, which I've never seen in a Tivit list, but kind of cool to have a little bit of cost reduction, especially as you get into some of these higher mana value spells. And then Final Showdown, I don't think I've seen since this card was spoiled, except for I'm pretty sure the last time I covered one of Khalil's lists. So pretty cool, grindy as hell version of Tivit here in this top 4. And wild to see that Tivit can make top cuts with 2 pretty drastically different variations of this deck. So sweet stuff here from our top 4 players. And distinctly not Tivit, our first blue farm, but also our tournament champion. Here we have Joe Roman 5319 with their blue farm variant. This is, I would be lying if I said that there was something particularly unique about this blue farm list. It is a pretty established blue farm list at this point. We got the 14 artifact sort of package here with this blue farm. It's becoming like sort of a traditional thing post ban. I feel like there's 2 sort of directions that blue farm pilots are leaning into. You're either going into like a bit heavier on creatures, professional facebreaker package, or the Mox Amber, I'm going to try and, barely get through my Mox Opal count type of blue farm list. And that's kind of what we're seeing here today. This one not on Necropotence. They're a Verity Circle for a little bit of card advantage there for that list as well. A lot of talismans, a lot of 2-mana rocks here to sort of supplement the artifact package. Things like Deadly Rollick, which I've seen a lot of these free spells are really, really picking up on numbers. So pretty interesting to see that as well. But some really cool stuff here from our winning blue farm list. A lot of silences too, actually, which is kind of interesting. Things like Orm's Chant as well. So a little bit of variation here. A couple spicy tech pieces in and out of this deck. But congrats to Joe for taking down the tournament on this blue farm list. And thank you all for watching. We got some really cool stuff from Goldsaber that he sent over to me, and I'll sort of have that flash up on the screen now. But basically, there is a promo from the tournament, and the proceeds go to charity. So pretty cool stuff there, and I'll sort of drop that here-ish and also in the description down below. Thanks, Goldsaber for sending along that information about the tournament, for getting me the list that was missing, all that kind of stuff. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed top 16 breakdowns like this. If you do, hit that like button, the subscribe button. If you want to be super, super generous, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. And if you want to take that next step up, check out the cEDH coaching that we mentioned all the places for earlier in this episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.